Hey everyone, welcome. Today we're diving into Sustainable Development Goal 5, gender equality. Now, this is more than just a basic human right. It's really the foundation for a peaceful and sustainable world. But as we're about to see, there are still these huge structural barriers holding women and girls back from reaching their full potential.
So, how are we going to break all this down? Well, first up, we're going to establish why gender equality is a global imperative, why it matters to absolutely everyone. Then, we'll get into the problem by looking at three key pillars: foundational rights, economic and social systems, and personal autonomy. After that, we'll look at the actual tools for empowerment, and we'll wrap up by thinking about your role in all this. All right, let's jump right in.
All right, first things first, let's really set the stage. Why is this goal so fundamental? Why is it considered a foundation for all the other goals? Okay, let's get one thing straight, right from the get-go. This isn't just about being polite or having good manners. I mean, those things are great, of course, but they don't get to the real root of the problem.
The real work, the hard part, is about dismantling entire systems. We're talking laws, economic structures, and social norms that keep inequality alive. So the big question is, how in the world do we actually do that? Well, that's what we're here to explore, by looking at the specific targets inside SDG Goal 5 that give us a blueprint for that change.
Okay, so let's dig into our first big pillar, foundational rights. Think of these as the absolute basics, the non-negotiables that everything else has to be built on. These are the things that everyone deserves, no questions asked.
So this pillar really comes down to three critical actions. First, we've got to end all forms of discrimination. Second, we have to eliminate all violence and, importantly, exploitation. And third, it's about stopping those harmful practices that have been around for way too long. Let's break those down.
Right, so here's the deal. Targets 5.1 and 5.2 are calling for an end to discrimination and violence everywhere. And I mean everywhere, in public spaces, but also in private, behind closed doors. This includes some of the most horrific and hidden crimes, like human trafficking and all other forms of sexual exploitation.
Okay, let's dig into that word, exploitation. You know, this isn't just about physical harm. It's a system where someone is treated unfairly just so someone else can benefit from their work or their resources. It's a systemic issue, not just the random act of one bad person.
And this leads us to Target 5.3, which is all about ending harmful practices. This includes things like child marriage and forced marriage, but also practices like female genital mutilation or FGM. This is a procedure that causes lifelong health problems and is a really serious violation of a girl's basic human rights, her right to be healthy and safe in her own body. It's a powerful example of why these deeply embedded, harmful traditions have to be challenged.
All right, on to our second pillar. So we've talked about basic rights. Now we're zooming out a bit to look at the bigger picture, the economic and social systems that keep inequality going day after day.
And in this pillar, we're zoning in on two huge systemic issues. First, there's all that unpaid care and domestic work that's just, well, invisible. And second, we're talking about leadership and making sure women have an equal seat at the table.
So Target 5.4 gets into something massive, something that's practically invisible but keeps our world running: unpaid work. I love this analogy. Think of it like an iceberg. The part you see above the water is the formal economy, jobs and salaries. But the massive part underneath is all the unpaid care and domestic work, the cooking, cleaning, childcare that our societies completely depend on. But you know what? None of that gets counted in the official economic numbers, like GDP. The goal is to finally recognize it and share the responsibility. And that's a perfect lead-in to Target 5.5. Because look, for real equality, you need women at the table, in leadership roles. Not just a few, but full and effective participation in politics, in business, everywhere. I mean, how can a decision be truly fair or effective if half the population wasn't even in the room when it was made?
Okay, this brings us to our third and final pillar, personal autonomy. And this one is maybe the most personal, but it's also incredibly political. It's about the fundamental right to have control over your own body, your health, and your own future. This pillar is all about Target 5.6, which is ensuring universal access to what we call reproductive rights. What does that really mean? It means every single person has the right and the resources to decide freely and responsibly if, when, and how many children to have. Now, why is this so critical for gender equality? Because without control over their own reproductive health, it's almost impossible for women to finish their education, build a career, or fully participate in public life. It's a cornerstone of freedom.
Okay, so we've gone through the three big pillars. That's the what.
We've identified what needs to change. Now, let's switch gears and talk about the how. This last set of targets is all about the practical tools we need to actually achieve this huge structural change.
So, the plan for empowerment really comes down to 3 key tools. It's like a 3-step process. Step 1. Give women equal economic rights to build their own financial independence. Step 2. Use technology to boost opportunities and access. And Step 3. Back it all up with strong laws to make sure progress is real and lasting. So let's quickly unpack these. Target 5A, that's all about economic power, the right to own land, to inherit property, to get a loan from a bank. Then you have 5B, which is about using technology, things like the internet and mobile phones, what we call ICT, to promote the empowerment of women by connecting them to information and opportunities. And finally, 5C. This is the big one that holds it all together, having strong, enforceable laws and policies in place that protect these rights. So we've covered a lot. We've looked at the problem from different angles, and we've talked about the toolkit for fixing it. But that brings us to the most important part of this whole conversation: you.
So, if there's one thing you take away from this, let it be this. Achieving gender equality is a massive, complex challenge. It's not easy, but it's solvable. It's not going to happen by accident, though. It's going to take real, systemic reform and empowered action from people like us.
And that really brings me to my final question for you. No matter what you do in the future, whether you become a doctor, an artist, an engineer, a politician, you're going to have a voice, a platform. So as a future leader, how will you use your voice to advocate for these specific structural changes we've talked about today?
Look, this is a challenge for every single one of us, and honestly, it's going to take every single one of us to solve it. Let's get to work building that better, more balanced world. Thank you.